So, welcome everyone. This is my third talk for Libertarians International. And in my next discussion, I have the Desert Links. Your name is Joël, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you are from New Hampshire. And as far as I heard, you are a guy who manages to do all transactions with Bitcoin. And I'm really interested to hear a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long journey in this, but I'm very happy to be where I am.
Okay, well, maybe start a little bit about you personally. What was your path? How did you manage to be so interested in Bitcoin? I don't know. You you have the Dogecoin behind you and a Dash T-shirt on. I think you are interested also in other cryptocurrency, but maybe we'll start a little bit about your journey and what made you so interested in these topics that you now think I do everything in Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go very far back, right, my family is from Mexico, and I grew up right in the north of Mexico, right after the first peso collapse in the 90s, where the fiat currency in Mexico collapsed and had to be kind of remade. And I always remember grandmother had all these old coins that just were worth nothing now because that fiat died and the new fiat existed. So I always understood from a very early age that this is something that can happen to any fiat currency. And of course, I was, after getting, my education, part of that comes to, the story of money. Like, where does money come from? Where does it get its value? And there's always that tracking from, coins, precious metals, and then eventually getting rid of the backing behind paper certificates.
Yeah.
And I never understood what happened there. Like how you just, if this is an integral part of the story, how do you get rid of the backing and just go with paper? Like, where does the value come from? And then of course it leads to knowing about the gold standard, about the U.S. Federal Reserve, and all those kinds of subjects that are kind of very common in the libertarian ethos today. But unlike other people, maybe I was very frustrated that we acknowledge something that's there that's not good, but we're not doing anything about it. It was the idea of changing to a gold standard, for example, was very hypothetical. There was no concrete plans. It was like, well, maybe one day. And I didn't like that. And I wanted to change that. And so somewhere around 2011, 2012, I started investigating. Peter Schiff who's now a little bit of a crypto skeptic these days, but he had a bank in a Goldback debit card he was advertising. And so I was trying to get to use that because I wanted to live all on gold because I didn't want to use, government money for everything. And it was right around 2012 when I first learned about Bitcoin. And I kind of started paying attention, talking about it. And it wasn't until 2013 I moved to New Hampshire for the Free State Project, which is, I don't know if your listeners will be very familiar, but it's basically just an intentional movement to move as many freedom-loving people in one spot so they can, I guess, have network effects and affect something. Sorry, go ahead.
Just for the listeners who don't know, I have, of course, a lot of German listeners because this is a German YouTube channel, and you can go back to my discussion with Lucas, but it's on German. If you don't know the Free State Project at all, I will link this documentary about the Free State Project as well in the video documentary, so you can inform yourself about the Free State Project in New Hampshire. So this is all you have to know, but we are going now into the conversation where I presume that everyone knows about what the Free State Project is. So I don't think we have to go into every detail of that. But of course, tell me everything that from your perspective.
Yes, and so in the process of moving, I stopped in Chicago, and a friend of mine paid for his part of lunch. We had a pizza for lunch, and he paid for his part in Bitcoin, and that was the first Bitcoin I received. It was about 0.115 Bitcoin, somewhere around then. I think the price was around $130 per coin at the time. And then by the end of the year, it got over 10 times that, right? And at that time, when I got to New Hampshire with other people in the Free State Project movement, as far as I know, everyone there at the time was using Bitcoin in some way. Everyone had some sort of a wallet, was sending and transmitting around. And I believe this was before payment apps for the fiat legacy systems were popular, like Venmo and then PayPal and Revolut and things like that. And so I understood right away the importance of this. This is like digital cash. This is like I can just pay anyone anything instantly, and I don't have to have any signups or intermediaries. But also, I'm not just paying government money. I'm paying something that's better, something that's sound money, that's limited, etc. And so, from that time period, I got very interested in cryptocurrencies. I wrote some copy for some of the Bitcoin Bigfoot flyers, which were some promotional flyers that were CoinDesk did an article about them in 2014. And I gave people rides to the airport and said, I want you to pay me in Bitcoin and things like that. I did some odd work, and it wasn't until the end of 2015 when I decided that I was getting too interested in this, and I wanted to really try it. I wanted to see if it worked. And so I said, I'm going to stop being paid in fiat currency. I'm only going to receive cryptocurrency, although specifically Bitcoin at the time. I'm only going to receive that from now on. And that was 2015. We're 2024. I have still not been paid in fiat currency over this time period. So eight and a half years so far. And around 2016, the middle of 2016, I closed my bank account as well and just decided to try to live entirely off of that. And I'll keep going. So please interject if you want to stop or redirect the conversation. But if not, I can just keep going.
No, well, maybe just a couple of questions. The first is when, if you don't mind me asking, what do you work so that it's possible for you to get paid in Bitcoin?
Yeah, so at the time in 2013, 14, I worked a lot in public policy nonprofits. And it was at the end of 2015, I decided to just only be paid in Bitcoin. And so therefore I had to do whatever job would pay me in that. It wasn't like at the time, my current employment didn't do that. So I had to stop doing that. A few days after I made this decision, I cold emailed Cointelegraph, which is one of the biggest crypto publications today, and just said, hey, I'm a good writer. I have this thing, what do you think? Can I write for you? Do you pay in Bitcoin? And then they answered me. It was like Christmas Eve or something like that. It was strange that the editor was working at that time, but he answered me back and said, sure, you can start writing articles for us. We'll pay you in Bitcoin. And so it started with that. And I did a few other like copywriting jobs and things like that and marketing things. And now I work, full-time in business development and marketing. And I have my own podcast and I do other things on the side. So, but basically the actual, how do I get paid in it? It wasn't, I had to find the work that would pay it. I had to ask. And today it's a lot easier as far as intermediary services that let you make sure your paycheck, your fiat money that comes in, never is fiat money, is only crypto. But that back then it was a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. And well, the second question is like, you get paid in Bitcoin, but I still guess you still have to pay taxes, right? So
yes,
how do you manage that?
So there's a few different ways of doing that. There are some intermediary services that let you pay all bills, like utility bills and things like that, which are very common in Europe these days. They're not in the US. There finally is one good one called Spritz Finance that lets you do this. And so basically I have an accountant who, long suffering accountant, has to deal with all my finances and just does the calculations, whatever you owe, and then you use a service like that to go get it paid off. But there was a time, there was a town in New Hampshire that was taking crypto for for tax payments, and there have been a few jurisdictions here and there in the U.S. that have done that, but it's always been very limited. It's a lot easier for most people to just use a bill pay service, which, as I said before, did not really exist in the U.S. until the last like 2 years.
No. Well, interesting, because every time I listen to people from modern monetary theory, they tell you Bitcoin is not a currency because it is not money because you can't pay your taxes in it, and you just debunked that.
Yeah, and because being in crypto, especially in the payments side of things, instead of like the NFT world or the DeFi world or purely the buying holding, like I'm very focused on the payments aspect of things. It's got me to learn a lot about legacy fiat payment systems, and there's so many layers in between like a piece of paper money and paying taxes for it. There's you have to go through the card provider and then the bank, and then their payment terminal has another setup and there's so many middlemen in between that it's hard to say that you can even pay your taxes in fiat, depending on the argumentation.
Okay. A lot of my listeners are probably Bitcoin maxis, and since they normally state like Michael Saylor, there's Bitcoin and there's shitcoin. But so I don't know. Just please give me your perspective on different cryptocurrencies, and what do you use them for? Is it for investment, or do you actually use it for, I don't know, whatever the use case is?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting subject, and I'm going to mention not just in my personal context, but also in context of the movement in New Hampshire, right? So New Hampshire is one of the first crypto hotspots in the world. Like in, I believe, 2010, Free Talk Live is a famous radio show run by Free State Project participants out of Keene, New Hampshire. And Gavin Andreessen, who was the person who inherited the keys from Satoshi Nakamoto, the GitHub commits, etc., who's Satoshi's heir, who lives not too far from here, as far as I remember. He drove up to be on the radio show, and he gave some of the hosts some of their first Bitcoins at like 60 or 80 US cents per coin, something like that, like an extremely early time. And though that radio station, again, we're talking fellow Free Staters, friends of mine, started talking about Bitcoin. And that's how someone who has become a little bit more of a, either a hero or a controversial figure today, but in the early days was 100% hero. Roger Ver heard about Bitcoin by listening to a Free Stater run show, Free Talk Live. He didn't know what Bitcoin was before then. And then he became the first angel investor in Bitcoin startups like, Kraken and Purse and some of these other large institutions. Really made it took it past like a cypherpunk hobby into like an actual like industry. And the first Bitcoin ATMs were invented in Manchester, New Hampshire by the Harvey brothers of Lamazoo. The library decentralized content protocol was also out of New Hampshire. There's quite a few of these like firsts that really just started here. And so the New Hampshire movement for cryptocurrencies was extremely focused on the digital cash peer-to-peer payments side of things, which used to be the only side of things in the early days. Obviously today, Bitcoin is an institutional asset class as well, and there's other interests in it other than like a cypherpunk peer-to-peer digital money that you can just use to pay for your coffee or whatever. But back then, that's kind of was the ethos of the movement. So in 2016.
Yeah, maybe. Just sorry to interrupt you, but it's just of course I see the problem to do transactions on the blockchain on the big. It's not logical to use the normal Bitcoin blockchain to buy a coffee. But of course, then there is Lightning Network, and that makes everything much easier and for far less fees. So I don't really know. If there is a problem anymore, and I don't know, I don't need really anything else.
Well, so for historical context here, it was about the middle or late 2016 when, again, I got rid of my bank account. I had no way of paying for things other than Bitcoin on layer one. That's all
Yeah.
there was. And
But back in
so
that time, the fees were not that high, so that was not a problem.
for me, it was because this was a situation where this is my day-to-day life. This is I
Yeah.
couldn't have the luxury of using a card to pay for things and then, experimenting with Bitcoin on the side. And I a few times I skipped lunch because I couldn't get a payment through in time. There was a
Okay.
few hours delay,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a few the fees were not very bad, but it was like maybe 50 cents, maybe $1 for a transaction. And if the
Okay, I
cost was
understand.
$3,
Mm-hmm.
and it became very difficult to do this. And
Mm-hmm.
the entire New Hampshire crypto scene sort of ended up at some point coming together and just saying we have to do something differently. And a lot of times when you hear like the block size war discussions, that came a year later. That came
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
after everything was
Yeah.
going. And it's a lot of people talk about, oh, well, that's Bitcoin Cash. That's what they did. But Bitcoin Cash didn't exist for a whole year when this was, my life, and I started to move on. Since then, I've mostly used Dash for day-to-day payments. It's worked the entire time through. A few years ago, I did start to experiment with the Lightning Network. I ran a node. I've used a few different wallets. Depending on your setup, sometimes it works very well. I'm a fan of the Phoenix wallet because it's a non-custodial wallet that does have a relatively simple user experience. And but because of this, I guess the eras, there's not a very strong Bitcoin maximalist sort of contingent in New Hampshire. There's plenty of different people, but I don't know any business that takes Lightning payments locally. Used to be a lot of businesses that did that. I know a few people that use Lightning wallets, for example, but those are mostly newer movers, people who are fans of Bitcoin that came more recently. The original movement here is very, I guess, kind of diverse, but also there is an interesting phenomenon where a lot of these people got into cryptocurrencies, especially and specifically Bitcoin, very early on. And now they don't really need to care too much about the way the movement is going because they've made so much money out of this that they've kind of disappeared. Like they just bought a beach house, they've just done whatever. They're just living their life in peace. One person I don't think he lives here anymore, but Mandrick he used to work for blockchain.com. I forget what he does right now, but I think he still might. He's another key early Bitcoin maximalist who remain Bitcoin maximalists today. There's a few other friends of mine who are, and mostly they've sort of, it kind of makes sense because if you have an asset and you're using it for one purpose, and that purpose, it becomes much more difficult to use it for that purpose, but the value of it goes exponentially higher, then it's going to sort of influence your relationship with that asset, right? It's that if something works really well for something and not really well for something else, you're going to sort of lean into it. So there's a lot of people I know who are very interested in trying to pay for everyday items with Bitcoin in 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, those years, that since have just stopped trying to do that altogether because it's been more difficult to do that. But at the same time, the assets performed fantastically well. So they have used it as a savings technology, as like a sound money, like a backing, digital gold. They've used that to a great extent. And so it is kind of interesting to see how that the shift in the community has kind of changed that.
Yeah, I understand. Well, still, this is a perspective back for what you said, 2014 or 2016, and now with the Lightning Network, did that experience like change? Why? I mean, still, Bitcoin is performing extraordinarily well, and of course, you don't use the blockchain, but now Lightning Network is like developed so that you can do everyday transactions like buying a coffee or something, or didn't that change and you still think well, I still use Dash for buying coffee?
Yeah, for me, it did not change. I keep on using mostly Dash, although I have used Lightning, I believe this year as well as last year. Last few years, I've been playing around with it. It still works significantly better. Lightning is something that I think that a lot of people have done Lightning a disservice by trying to make it something that it's not, or make it uh, it is a solution to some problems. The thing is, if you use it in an entirely peer-to-peer method where you run your own node, it's very it's very work intensive. You have to do a lot of work to make sure you rebalance channels, make sure your connections are good with other providers, et cetera, et cetera. It's a
With
lot
a
of
Phoenix
work.
wallet?
Yeah, Phoenix is managed, and so it's a lot
Yeah,
better.
sure.
I still see a lot of people. So me, because again, I've been using cryptocurrency for a very long time, like over 10 years. So I'm experienced. Some people complain about Phoenix, which I don't understand, because for me it's very usable.
Yeah.
But it's some people, if sometimes you have a very high on-chain fee environment, and then loading or rebalancing the channel will cost a lot of money, and people will not understand because they don't understand how Lightning works. They don't understand why they have to do that. I've seen a lot of people kind of go into things like, for example, Wallet of Satoshi, or they're using the Exodus Lightning option. But those are both fully custodial, and both of those, as I just saw an announcement today about Exodus, they both are disallowed from US customers now, because of US laws make that a money transmitter if it's a custodial solution, and therefore they can't do that. So Wallet of Satoshi will not service US customers. Exodus just shut down their Lightning offering for US customers. And for a lot of people, that's how they interacted with Lightning. I still think Phoenix is the best way for people to interact with Lightning, because you get something that's technically non-custodial, but it's also heavily managed, so you don't have to deal with a lot of these kind of liquidity balancing things yourself, or routing. It works relatively well. But locally here, I do not know a lot of people that use Lightning. I know one or two. It doesn't seem to be very widespread.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, we have in Germany, it's a meetup. We call ourselves 21, so 21. It's widespread. We have meetups in, I think, every bigger country in Germany. We meet. Most of the meetups are once a month. There are so many meetings where, like a Bitcoin conference, or where Bitcoiners meet everywhere across. Well, Germany and Switzerland and Austria. So I more it's not they don't like crypto. That's it's most of the time it's just like I can understand that from their perspective. You now tell me about use cases about other cryptocurrency because the way you use it, but Germans are smart as some kind of, but I understand why they do that, because suddenly this is not a discussion anymore between we have here Bitcoin, which is a solution to a very known phenomenon, to a huge problem of fiat currency and everything else. And then there is, I don't know, stuff like well, not Dogecoin, but you know that like XRP, or I don't know, that is just look at everything that goes on with FTX. So it was it was a huge process where well, it was just fraud. And this is where the people who are the Bitcoin maxis are trying to save other people from, who are just there are bots everywhere on Twitter, on Telegram, and they tell you here you can make a lot of money, and this is why the Bitcoin maxis go ahead and that this is Bitcoin and everything else is shit. And I think just I'm not so much onto this. I like if you have a use case and you can make your claim that something is useful for you. Okay, I'm not very much into technical details, but we can discuss that. But most people just stop there and say, I don't want to talk about it. You're just wrong. It's just the way it is.
That makes sense. It's a very interesting space that I've basically seen grow from almost nothing to where it is today. And what we have to realize is Bitcoin was a phenomenal like technological innovation that allowed a lot of things to happen beyond just the money use case. And since then, the space does so many different things. Like, say, you have people doing NFTs, you have people building financial things, whatever. But I've given a lot of thought about this, and at the end of the day, it's I, it's about why does all this matter? And in my opinion, everything we have created is a tool, and a tool is a tool for a purpose. And the purpose for me is financial freedom, right? And there's a
Yes,
few
sure.
different purposes. Some people, for example, it's interesting to tell because depending on the country people are in, people have very different relationships with crypto networks. Like, for example, in South America, and one of my friends, Sergey Kotliar, is the CEO of BitRefill, and definitely one of the most prominent Lightning Network kind of advocates and figures in the space. But despite that, his business has to, run as a business. And in Latin America, overwhelmingly people prefer to pay with Tether over the Tron network. Now, I'm not a
Hmm.
personal fan of Tron at all. I don't like Justin Sun. I don't like any of that kind of stuff. And also, I'm not a fan of the US dollar because it's a fiat currency, and I, think fiat currencies are shitcoins, right? But in some parts of the world, people really prefer that because they view it as a tool of, I want to be able to send dollars to friends and family, pay for things. I cannot access banks, so this is my tool. And
Hmm.
those same people don't care if the number goes up over time because it might go down over the course of a week and then they're unable to pay all their bills and they cannot handle that downward volatility in order to have the upward volatility. And their
Yeah.
use case is very different from someone, for example, I find in like New Hampshire is one of the more wealthy areas of the US. And it's very much kind of like a small, like Switzerland corollary, right? And I found that telling people that they can hold and telling merchants, for example, they can hold and stabilize their value in a stable coin or by converting to USD or whatever does not seem to be nearly as attractive as elsewhere because there's people who they understand that crypto is something interesting and new. They're like, oh, I hear about this Bitcoin thing all the time. I'd like to have some. And they don't mind if it goes down a little bit because
Yeah.
they're not going to starve to death in the meantime. They're much more interested in that part. And they also have very good access to banking services, so they don't really care that much. But then the opposite is true in different parts of the world. So I guess all that to say, um, I constantly reevaluate what I'm doing with my life versus the uh, my goals and principles, and am I using the tools that are best used for that? And so, freedom money is what matters to me, right? It's the goal for me is freedom money, money that enables freedom. And if it does not enable freedom, it doesn't work. If it does, it
Yeah.
does. And if
Mm.
someone else achieves freedom, then if they manage, maybe if they're using a strange tool for that, I might tell them that that's not the best tool. But ultimately, I'm not going to judge them for pursuing freedom in their own way.
Yeah, sure. Especially if they don't harm you in any way, right? Um,
Yes, exactly.
Uh, the documentary of the Free State Project, and also Lucas told me about the Goldbacks. And
Mhm.
give me your opinion on that a little bit. Do you think just no, it's just cryptocurrency for me, or don't you value gold at all?
I personally have very little interest in that. I personally think that cryptocurrency and all the technologies it enables, after purely the money, also mostly the money, mostly freedom money, but in addition to that, that's what I personally find very interesting because it's not just freedom, it's also progress at the same time. It's also
Hmm.
technological progress. And so I like the confluence of those two things. The gold backs, I do think they're interesting because I more than anything, I think they're like a good teaching instrument. They're a good thing to teach people about money, where it's like, oh, everyone understands gold has value. Not everyone understands Bitcoin has value yet, but
Mm.
everyone understands gold because of its historical applications, because of jewelry and things like that. And so if you give a merchant, say, hey, can I pay you in this piece of gold? Can I leave these as a tip? Can I do whatever? Then they understand.
Mhm.
I'm sorry about
But
that. Anyway, as such, I think it's always good if it's what takes if that's what gets people away from fiat currency. I have no problem with that. I just think that it's a confluence. I think that Goldbacks are a reaction to the Bitcoin revolution. I don't think it would have
mhm.
happened because there's, for example, the term fiat currency is something that is widely understood these days. I don't think everyone does, but a lot of people do. But when I started using the term like a decade ago, no one knew what that meant. Then the concept that the I word, inflation, no one knew about inflation unless they were in an economics or finance field like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Now,
but
every single human in the US, as far as I know, knows what inflation is. And so I think that Bitcoin started this resurgence of these ideas.
yeah, just in the beginning, you told me that you lived in Mexico and you experienced inflation like in real life. Like
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
had money, you went to the supermarket, and you cannot buy anything with it. So this is real life inflation. And
Yes, that's real life in for a lot of the world. And I'm saying in the US, it was not real life, but now it
yeah,
is
yeah,
real
yeah,
life.
yeah. Mm,
Now people have seen from all the money printing that happened since 2020, um, just the last few months, like 3 to 6 months, we've seen the actual effect on prices, where a lot of prices are up 30, 40% or something. We're actually
mhm.
seeing that in real time, and people are experiencing that. They're posting all over social media, like, wow, like this is
Yeah,
what I used to be able to buy. And the effect happened over a very short period of time. And
yeah.
now we're all under the entire world is united now. We all understand the evils of fiat currency.
Mm. Yeah, I watch that. I see that a lot of on Twitter because I do memes and I follow a lot of American meme blogs who post that stuff all the time,
Mhm.
like eggs exploding in prices and everything, and people are just starting to complain. I don't have any money to purchase my goods in the normal supermarket. Like normal
Mhm.
grocery shopping is like unaffordable, and I don't know how long this goes because I don't experience it in that extreme now in Germany, but I'm afraid it will come to us eventually.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It comes for everyone.
yeah, well, in the end of the day, then the US dollar is still the world reserve currency. So I guess you will be the last ones who, yeah, who will suffer the great losses. I don't know. Interesting times we live on, but still scary.
Yeah, the
um,
one thing is, I am really happy at where we are as in the world now as far as choice, because just 15 years ago, you had to use the fiat currency of your country's designation. Now, the fact that I myself, several other people in New Hampshire, I know people in Finland, I know people in El Salvador, obviously, I know people all over the world who don't use fiat currency now. And that's
mhm.
mine. Like if someone told me back when I was trying to use, the Peter Schiff's Goldback debit card, that at some point anyone could just choose to opt out of fiat in just 10, 15 years, I would have been like, pinch me, I'm dreaming. This is great. This is very good. And just the fact that you can have, like, as much as I am skeptical about the whole sending Tether over Tron kind of thing in Latin America, or like the dollarization of things, if people can choose a different fiat currency, even though it's still fiat, that's an improvement. But more importantly, once you exercise a free choice, now it's another's choice away from to something sound that's not going to be inflated away. And so just the fact that there are countries that do accept non-fiat currencies as legal tender. The fact that it's like, well, they did it, and now that you can't stop it now that there is choice, there's no monopoly anymore, and eventually better solutions, freer solutions will come to the top.
Are you afraid of CBDCs and the attempt of the government to control cryptocurrencies or Goldbacks or everything else that is not their fiat currency?
Yes, I guess I should say I am wary of it more than afraid. Is in I see it, and I see it's a problem that we have to fight. We have to be very aware on how to deal with it. I think that worst case, if worst case we end up where we were before the Bitcoin Genesis block. Worst case, we just take a step back in time. But I think that we're already so far beyond that now that I'm just trying to. We're already in the era of freedom and free money right now, and I'm trying to make sure that we consolidate as much of those gains as possible. So for me, something like a CBDC can roll back some of the progress we make, and so I guess that's my point, is the perspective of, I don't think this is a fatalistic problem that will just make things worse than they ever have been before. I don't believe that. I believe they will try, of course, but I guess the point is, I think the thing about a CBDC is it's something I'm very, I guess, aware of conceptually, but in terms of what does that mean in practice, that is very undefined still, as far as like a central, like right now, the entire world, for the most part, or let's just say Western Europe, uses a central bank issued currency digitally. So you could argue that it's already a CBDC, kind of, but then you're like, well, that's not it. It's going to be something different. Well, what is it going to be? Is it going to be a blockchain similar system that then gets put into all payment processors? Is it going to be still the same unit of count, like the euro or the dollar? Are they going to make a new one? What is it going to look like?
I don't think it's that complicated. I just think that they will transfer pretty much every bank account to the central bank. So they centralized power. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah, that's kind of already happened in the US over the last 6 or so months, I think. There's a system called FedNow, which is run by the Federal Reserve, the US central bank, which is a payment rail that is now getting integrated into all the banking systems. And supposedly, according to their marketing material, it has the power to do things like choose how users will spend their own money. Like if a customer if he owes a debt, but he wants to buy something different, the payment will be blocked for that and only be allowed to be paid for the debt, and things like that. All this kind of CBDC stuff is, you could argue it's already here, because you have a central bank controlling the payment rails in the US between banks. There still are banks. It just, at some point, what's the next step? Is it going to be a unified login where you don't have separate bank accounts, you just have a universal central bank provided account? Did they do that? Is that the next step? It's hard to tell. But the point is, as long as people live on fiat currency, they are vulnerable to this, because at some point the government can just say, these are the new rules, this is the way it's going to be. And so I guess my perspective is, the more we have choice, the more we have options, the less we need to be afraid of that. Because before, it's like, okay, you could only pay in US dollars. Well, the US dollars will be an Orwellian nightmare at some point, if they aren't already. But if you can pay in US dollars, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, whatever, Dash, Ethereum, whatever it is, if you can pay in 5 different things, if the most popular method turns into an Orwellian nightmare, that's still bad, but it's not that bad, because we have choices. We could pick other things. And so I think that like privacy is huge too. It's not just using alternative currencies. I'm big into device privacy. One of my good friends, Naomi Brockwell, used to be known as Bitcoin Girl, and now is focused very much on online privacy, is a great resource for all this kind of stuff. And I would definitely recommend her work because right now, even without the CBDC, there's a lot of tracking and things like that can happen to all our financial activity. It just is more work for government or corporations to gather this information, but it's still there. So yes, I do believe CBDCs are a threat. I know that Venezuela's tried a few different ones that have all failed. I know Nigeria tried the e-Naira and it was a huge failure as well.
Yeah,
Governments
don't
not
let
very good at
governments
these
do
things.
that.
What I'm more concerned about, right, is what if governments start to encourage the usage of stablecoins on different networks like Ethereum or Solana or whatever, at the same time is they make all stablecoin issuers register with the central bank. So for example, if they say Tether, USDC, whatever else, you have to register with us. And then that is basically a CBDC, because in the smart contract functionality of these stablecoins today, they already have like block lists. In fact, I think USDC is something like 40% more expensive to transact with than DAI, the decentralized stablecoin, because it has to run through the banned lists before, it has to compute the banned list before sending out the transaction. So this functionality is already there. The government doesn't need to build anything new. They just have to go to the stablecoin issuers and say, you are counterfeiting unless you register with us and do everything we tell you. And then we kind of have that. And maybe all stablecoins will be banned and the government will say, from here on out, only our stablecoin can be done. And then you have the CBDC that's on Tron, on Ethereum, on whatever, on Liquid, wherever you have it, and the central bank is running the entire thing. That's the thing I think we have to be worried about as well.
Do you consider yourself to be a libertarian, a freedom fighter, or do you just think like, I want to be able to control my own money and everything else, I don't care, I'm not political?
Yes, I would definitely consider myself to be a libertarian freedom fighter, as it were. I believe both from a moral perspective, but also through a very practical sort of scientific perspective, that freedom is maximizing human freedom maximizes the benefit of the species. I like freedom in my life, but I also want, at some point I'm going to die and then there will be nothing other than bones left of me. And when that happens, I would like to leave something else behind for the rest of the world. And so if I can push freedom forward, I think that's the most, it's just a simple flow chart of how can I have the most impact on the world after I'm gone, is maximize human freedom. And the area I think I can do that the most is through cryptocurrency and decentralized technology, and in the intentional community movement. So I think the Free State Project is an extremely important thing, but it's also it's kind of like the Bitcoin of intentional movements. It's like the first. It's the trendsetter, the one that invented the concept of it. But I think in the future we've heard about like people doing a Bitcoin citadel in Miami or something, and then of course El Salvador. There's a lot of people that move there because of that kind of thing. And then of course I have some friends who are involved with the Liberland movement. There's all kinds of different projects of people basically choosing their own destiny, and if their environment does not allow them to live to their freest, best potential, they change their environment with other like-minded people. And I think that really started with New Hampshire, but I think that free choice is becoming a huge motivator for advancing the species, whether it's Tesla and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and all these people moving to Texas to have greater control over their destinies, or whether it's whatever. I think that competitive effect makes different jurisdictions compete over which can offer the best service to customers. Whereas before, taxpayers were victims. They were just, you live here, the government takes from you and does what they want. And there's always that part of the foundational ethos of libertarianism is voluntary, it's choice. You should have the choice to do things. And what makes taxation theft and not just a fee is that there is no I'm not paying option. You can, your option is you have to pay. Maybe if you vote a certain way, you get to pay less. But if you have a free choice of geography, for example, now you don't have to pay. Maybe all these jurisdictions will still charge some kind of a tax, but if you lose the vote, you can leave. And I think that's almost as powerful as the crypto movement, as the decentralized tech movement, as far as advancing the human species, as far as if we can live wherever we want. Now you will have jurisdictions that aren't able to just say, I'll take everything from you. They have to make it attractive to you. They have to buy your consent. They have to request consent. And it's not a perfect thing. Government still exists. It's still violent. They still will arrest you for doing things, but it's a massive improvement.
Okay, great. I think we should bring this to an end. Just tell for our audience, can they find you anywhere? Do you have a Twitter account, or I don't know. I guess I will put it also in the video description, but also you can comment everyone, and Joel will, I think, gladly answer any questions if there's something in particular they want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an open book. I'm on Twitter at the Desert Links, as you can see on the screen there. And I have a podcast called Digital Cash Network, and it's just a side project that I do to keep myself informed and talk to a lot of very smart people. And just the final thing I will just say, everyone, the only way to know anything for sure is by experiencing it yourself. And so if you care about financial sovereignty, practice it. If you don't like fiat currency, stop using it. And of course, it doesn't have to be all overnight, but try things. Like someone says, hey, why don't you try to not use this? Okay, then do it. Get some crypto, whatever. If you have a highly, if it's like a very Bitcoin maximalist type audience, definitely download the Phoenix wallet. Download the BitRefill app, start buying real things in your real life with it and experience that. And then, especially in Europe, there's a company called SwapIn, which lets you pay all your bills also. So you could live entirely off of Bitcoin today if you wanted to. I could show you how, but you can also figure out how yourself. And just start trying that, and just take some steps, and maybe you'll learn a lot for sure. But at least you should have it to be realistic for sovereignty. Whereas it would be a nightmare that's like, okay, next week they're announcing the CBDC massive rollout worldwide, one world currency. It's all going to be tracked by one world government. What are you going to do? Okay, well, let's all switch to Bitcoin. Do you know how? Has anyone out there used it? Like, can you reliably learn how to pay all your bills in a week's time on this technology you've almost never touched, you've invested in? You click buy on the centralized exchange, but that's it? Like, no, start practicing now so you're ready if something like this happens.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure.